good evening, and welcome to the Oregon Trail as it really worked. More timing and water and group rules than heroics. A months-long haul from the Missouri River toward the green Northwest, with wagons creaking and lists in every head. Here is the quiet twist. Most wagon train deaths weren't from attacks at all. Illness and rivers did most of the damage. If you genuinely enjoy this channel, feel free to like and subscribe only when it helps you unwind. No pressure, and tuck this small line in your pocket. History is a road that looks smooth until you feel the gravel. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now, city and hour if you like, even your time zone. Dim the lights, unclench your jaw, and let the slow whirl and hum of your bedroom fan ride in the background. Now let's step quietly toward the first morning on the trail. A tin coffee cup warms your hands at first light on the Missouri River. The boards under your boots are damp, and a thin fog sits over the water. Wagons stand nose to tail by the levee at Independence and St. Joseph. Collars get checked. Yokes settle with a dull knock. Tack rubs and leather creaks. Flour dust hangs in the cool air, and someone coughs softly into a sleeve. The point is simple, even if the road isn't. Land and a reset. Handbills promised rich soil and easy crops. Letters from cousins bragged about salmon and dark loam. A few want gold in California. Many want debts behind them. Most want space that a crowded street back east can't give. The trail is a long spreadsheet with mud for ink. You count flour by the pound and bacon by the side. You guess what the axles and chains will suffer. Spare parts ride under the seat. Barrels leak if you let them. The coffee mill rattles in a sack. A small anvil clinks. You plan for water, grass, and a place to stop before the light goes. Families get quiet when the first teams move. Children climb in and hold tight to bed ropes. A horn sounds down the row. A wheel turns, then another. Iron rims rasp over the street and drop off the planking to dirt. It is not a charge. It is a slow roll that expects to last for months. Grass has to be up because the oxen need feed. Therefore, a March start can cripple a team. Late April is safer. May is common. Leave too late and the Platte runs higher. Ferries get crowded. Heat slows the oxen, and the blues keep their snow longer. The start window matters more than any boast at a tavern. Optimism is stacked higher than your wagon. The old trail hands eye your load. They touch the spokes and the hubs. They ask about your axe handle and your grease. Oxen draw steady and accept the whip's crack. Mules are quick and clever, but like to test people. Horses run hot and need more grain. A stranger suggests 2 yoke of oxen instead of 1. He glances at your barrel count and nods once. A clerk with a notebook walks the line and writes names. Neighbors drift toward neighbors. Big families clump together. You hear talk of a captain, a watch schedule, and who gets the front when space narrows. The river town leans back behind you as the mud road opens and the prairie lifts its pale face to the sun. You ease forward with the wagon line while captains call, and the teams lean into the traces. Dawn finds the Rivertown market street full of wagons, oxen, and people. The air holds a sour-sweet smell of animals and damp wood. Iron rims clack on planks as a team edges past. Cheap land pulls hardest. Letters from the Willamette talk about rain, timber, and fields that do not wear out fast. Debts and crowded towns push from behind. Family ties tug too, a cousin writes from Oregon. Then a brother decides, Then you look at your kids and think about a cleaner ledger and a wider sky. Departure is not a feeling. It is a date circled on a calendar and watched. People talk about grass for the teams and the spring floods and the long miles past the Platte. They count how many weeks it takes to reach South Pass and the Blue Mountains. They listen to travelers who came back only as far as the next town. They remember horror stories of late snow. They do the math out loud in camp. People watch the calendar because the mountain passes close with early snow. Therefore, the departure window is narrow. Planning this was like moving cross-country with one gas station you must not miss. Leave too early, and you face cold when the grass is thin. Leave too late, and you meet snow that shuts a pass and drains your food barrel. A locked trail holds you in place while animals lose weight and spirits fall. 3 towns offer the on-ramps. Independence in Missouri throws its gates wide first. St. Joseph gathers people who want a faster ferry and a shorter wait. Council Bluffs feeds trains that crossed from Iowa and swelled on the east bank. Blacksmiths shape hoops and fit shoes. Teamsters swap news about river levels and last night's vote. In these places, a wagon company forms and elects a captain. The group picks simple rules so the days sync up. Up at first light. No firing near the grass. No cutting lines in ferry queues. A captain calls the course and settles small fights so the miles keep coming. Optimism packs lighter than flour and takes up more room. The start looks busy because it is. Posts hold notices about cholera upriver and a sale on bacon. Traders push sacks of seed and spare spokes. Prices rise when the river climbs and drop when a steamboat arrives. New arrivals stack crates and stow kettles. Chalky flour dust hangs in a bar of sunlight. A clerk weighs everything and watches faces as the scale tips. Now, pick a wagon and the animals that will actually get you there. The common choice is a prairie schooner, a canvas-topped farm wagon that keeps off sun and drizzle and little else. Most people do not ride in it much. Weight breaks things. You walk to spare the teams and the wheels. Leather creaks as teams shift in harness. That sound turns into a kind of heartbeat when the line finally moves and the street opens toward the prairie. Bad timing still shadows the talk. People remember the year a storm iced the Blue Mountains in early September. They point at a date and say, "Go by then, or do not go." It is not a dare. It is arithmetic backed by weather and the shape of the land. The safe plan leaves when the grass is good, the rivers have calmed, and the passes are still open. Your hand grips the sideboard while someone checks the hubs. A boy runs past with a yoke pin. The captain lifts his hat and calls the order for tomorrow. We angle toward the yard where wheels get checked and yokes go up onto thick necks. You stand beside the wagon as the wooden yoke and bow settle on the pair in front. The pins knock, the curve hugs their necks, and warm animal breath fogs in the cool morning. A teamster walks beside the team, not up on the seat. His hands test a spoke for looseness. Pitch from a grease tin shines on a hub, and a tail flicks flies from a sweating flank. A wagon's floor holds what keeps you moving. Sacks of flour ride low. Bacon in tight barrels, coffee in tins, tools wrapped in canvas, and water barrels tied near the axle. A kettle and a Dutch oven nest near the tailgate. A quilt, a Bible, and one framed photo wedge, where they will not rattle loose. Weight lives near the axle to spare the running gear. Heavy goods go flat and tight so they will not shift on ruts. Lighter bundles fill the corners. If you grab the sideboard and feel a sway, you move the load again until the box sits level. Oxen take the work best. Mules step quicker and cost more at the start. And horses are fast, but need grain and careful hands. You look at the horns, the broad backs, and think about feed and repair. Because oxen tolerate yokes and scarce feed better. Therefore, they were the safer choice for most families. Choosing oxen was like buying a sturdy pickup instead of a sports car. Overloading is the quiet enemy. A broken axle risk from overloading sits under every mile, and soft ground makes the team blow hard and slow. Hooves sink, the chain stretches, and the driver's voice turns flat. The trail collects interest on every extra pound. Limits feel harsh in camp when someone wants one more trunk. You count nails, not souvenirs. A spare bow hangs under the bed. An extra tongue bolt rides in a sack with cold chisel, rawhide, and rope. A small saw and a draw knife promise repairs when luck runs out. Smart loads leave room for spares. A short box of iron bits, a few spokes, and a tin of pitch do not look brave, but they keep you rolling. Grease keeps hubs cool. A water bucket and a patch of rawhide can hold a cracked fellows long enough to reach a blacksmith. Smart loads and spare parts trade glamour for actual miles. The teamster walks again, steady as a metronome, and calls by name. He watches ears and feet more than the horizon. He keeps the whip tucked, the words simple, and the pace honest. You hear a slow creak from the wheel and the soft pad of hooves. With weight set, the miles can start to stack. The day stops being a puzzle and becomes a pattern. With weight set, learn the daily rhythm that makes miles add up, fall in by the wheels, and feel the day stretch into a routine you can repeat. You walk beside the wagon, dust baking your boots. The wheel gives a slow, tired creak, and the canvas top rustles when a crosswind nudges it. Near noon, the dry grit coats your tongue. The day started in the dark. Someone kicked coals to life, stirred coffee, and pulled bacon from a sack. Teams were yoked by lantern glow, and the train moved as the rim of light cut the grass. The schedule is blunt because miles must be banked before the weather turns. Therefore, days start before sunrise and end early. It ran like a startup on a brutal deadline, only the deadline was snow. The scout rides ahead where the ground dips and the trail splits. He looks for a shallow ford, firm banks, and water that is not tainted. He also tracks the best line up a ridge so wheels do not snap and wagons do not tip. Behind him, herders drift along the flanks and rear, keeping cattle off fragile grass near creeks and out of the wheat-like brush that cuts mouths. When the train halts, the cook for each family or mess starts a fire and puts on a pot before the kettles and Dutch ovens fill. Most people walk. Wagons are heavy and springless, so riding in one over ruts, jars teeth, and bruises hips. Hoof health rules the day. Push the animals too hard, and the smallest flaw becomes a limp. Hooves wear thin on rocky stretches. A stone bruises. A yoke rubs a sore spot raw. A team that is lame can turn 10 miles into 5, and one broken ox uses up a family's spare cash and time. So the pace is steady, not flashy. Short noon halts let animals blow, chew, and drink, and drivers check hooves with their hands, cool and dusty to the touch. There are other quiet duties that keep the wheels moving. Axles need grease. Harness needs checking. Someone scouts a bit of wood or buffalo chips for the noon fire. Someone manages the water kegs. Children watch the milk cow so she does not stray, These tasks feel small when you hold them up to the horizon, but they stack into movement. Camp comes early when the light is still long. Wagons pull in and arc into a circle, or a U, not for a siege, but for order, shelter, and livestock control. The circle is a fence with better marketing. It narrows the gaps so calves do not bolt. It marks where animals are tied, where fires go, and which wagon sits where. It also makes a windbreak when the evening air turns sharp. As iron cools, camp smoke threads into a pale evening sky. Men and women split chores by habit and need. Someone draws water while someone else shakes flour into a pan. Children gather chips and tug a rope line taut. A kettle ticks as it cools on a stone. The scout rides back and says where tomorrow's water lies. Herders count heads and listen for the slow chew of the herd. A traveler cuts a strip of leather into a new tug. Another writes 2 lines in a diary and rubs a sore heel. Routine wins here. A well-timed start, a clean harness, and a careful graze at a half-mile today and another tomorrow. And that tiny margin becomes a week in hand when the first cold breath comes down off the mountains. The rules are simple, and they live in the way people move. Keep a line. Mind the animals. Share word up and down the train. Follow the scout's hand. Listen to the herders when the stock bunches up. Eat early and sleep early. It works until the ground changes. At water, the pattern buckles. Routines crack at rivers, where physics and money make the rules. Walk down to the bank where the river slides by wider than it looked from camp. Teams stand hip-deep in a brown sheet of water, while voices call out soundings. Cold water numbs calves. Wet rope smells like tar. Men point at ripples and gravel bars and argue about angles. Wheels knock on stones under the surface, then go silent where the bottom drops. Choices line up fast. You can ford where the current looks shallow and the bottom is firm. You can pay for a rope ferry or a flatboat service at the busy crossings. Or you can caulk wagon seams to float and turn a boxy cart into a short, twitchy hull. Grease, pitch, and time turn into buoyancy. Ferrymen and rope guides hold the gate. They set prices and schedules, and a full river pushes both higher. A ferry plank thumps. A pole grinds along the gravel bottom. A rope stretched from bank to bank, hummed by the current, turns strangers into a queue. Morning wind flips hats and pages in the tally book. Because wagons can float and tip in current, therefore careful loading and route choice decides if gear stays dry. Heavy tools sink a corner if they ride high. Barrels lashed low fight the roll. A shallow entry with room to turn keeps the team straight. A deep bend that looks calm can shove a wagon sideways. Picking a crossing was like choosing between bad Wi-Fi networks when the upload matters. The ford is free and open, but a hidden drop can cost animals. The ferry feels safer, but it bottlenecks and eats daylight along with dollars. Caulking wins you control, but it burns a half day in every idle hand, and the wind can rise while you work. Loss counts read like a pantry in a barn. A strong ox goes under when a yoke jams and the pole twists. A sack of flour bursts and makes a white cloud on brown water, then nothing. Gunpowder turns to useless clumps inside a wet keg. The camp clock keeps ticking while you wring blankets and mend ropes. A wet coat steams in weak sun on the far bank. Rivers don't negotiate. They invoice. The bill shows up in drowned stock, spilled food, and soaked tools that will fail later. It shows up in hours lost to lines and repairs, which become days when storms stack up. The quiet truth is that water took more than any bandit. Not all dangers splash. Some ride the water into your canteen. Follow the stream a little upstream and watch camps line the bank and dig shallow wells. A low mound sits just off the ruts, capped with a simple board cut from a wagon side. Wind presses the grass flat and then lets it up again. A date is burned in with a nail or only a set of initials. You pass with your hat in hand, then set it back and keep walking. A sour tang of vinegar leaks from a corked bottle in the wagon. Someone swears it keeps sickness away. You dab it on a cloth and touch it to your lips. The smell bites the nose, sharp and clean. It gives the mind a small handle to hold. Water decides camp. Fires stand upstream, stock brought down to drink below, and the latrines shoved farther still. People scoop holes near the bank to make a quick, shallow well, then fill their barrels and go. No one lingers. The Platte and other rivers carry gossip and waste at the same time. And in the late 1840s, the cholera along the Platte got a reputation to match its speed. Because contaminated water traveled faster than wagons, therefore illness spread in waves along the same road. It moved like a cold through an open office, only the office kept walking. A ladle rings lightly against a tin bucket. You watch for clear flow, skim off bugs, and still wonder if it is safe. Cholera is quick. Loose bowels, cramps that knot the calves, skin gone cool and slack, thirst that feels like an empty drum. The real danger's dehydration, which steals strength fast and dries the body faster than it can be refilled. A person can sit up at breakfast and be too weak to stand by afternoon. The decline is rapid and quiet, and it scares everyone who sees it. Remedies line the wagon chest in small brown bottles and folded papers. Rest is always first. Opiates take the edge off pain and slow the gut. Patent tonics promise balance, and they taste like spice and alcohol. Prayer goes up over the bedroll. Luck decides more than anyone admits. The doctor bag held courage in questionable chemistry. Fear drills habits. Hands get washed more when water allows. Coffee or tea is favored because the boil gives a margin. Wells are edged with boards to keep the sides from caving, and waste pits get moved farther out past the picket lines. Some companies push past crowded bends on the Platte and camp on high ground, trading wind for less risk. People whisper about bad stretches and ask strangers which bank is worse, then avoid the answer by leaving before sunup. They space wagons wider near any ferry and watch what goes into the barrels as if a single leaf could decide a fate. The Platte Valley keeps its drift of graves, and you learn to read the gaps between them. Where they thin, the water was kinder, or the timing luckier. News rides forward with loaned horses. On bad weeks, a hush sits on the river like low fog. It turns scatterbrained kids into serious kids for a day and makes campfire songs sound smaller. Most losses come from disease and dehydration, not gunfire. The rifles still hang by the driver's seat, and yet the real enemy sits low in the water and the gut. It shapes roots, tempers, and sets the clock for when to rise and when to move. After fear and funerals, the work of eating and fueling continues anyway. Now step back toward camp, where supper smells meet the last light. Take a slow breath in. Let the breath out a little longer. Set your shoulders loose. Take a second breath. Easy through the nose, slow out the mouth. Let that exhale linger. Take a third breath, simple and steady. Drop your shoulders again and let your jaw unclench. A small fire burns low at the edge of camp. The wagon line forms a windbreak, a quiet row that shelters the beds and the pots. Firelight wobbles across a canvas side. Animals are grazing near camp with herders watching. A boy checks the picket ropes and walks back to the light. A spoon taps once on a pot and goes quiet. The teams will be tied closer when the stars rise, then set back on grass at dawn. A tin cup warms your palms. You notice the hush after a kettle sigh. The quiet sits like a thin blanket over the grass. Plates move hand to hand, and no one speaks much. A few coals are banked for morning. The cook keeps an eye on sparks and lids. Evening cook-fire routine brings the camp into order. Supper fixes people in place. Water barrels are checked, and night watches are set. Timing keeps wheels out of mud and heat. Water picks the spots where camps last. Habit keeps tempers low and work clear. Because timing, water, and routine kept you steady, therefore the day bent around them. A short prayer might be said, or a song is hummed low, and the chores end on time. Lanterns swing once, then are pinched out. Axes are stacked by a wheel. Harness is coiled and laid where hands can find it in first light. The oxen that graze closest belong to the next day's lead team. Herders trade a last word and count heads. The line of wagons holds its shape, like a fence built by agreement. You are only listening. Your shoes are clean, and your feet are not sore. You can let the dust settle and feel the fan hum beside you. If your mind wants to walk, let it sit instead. You can leave the wheel creak in the distance and keep the night close and kind. Next, we follow the food and the fuel, calm and unhurried. The fire's glow will lead us to the cook fire's work and the rations on the move. Let your breath ease. Now listen for the skillet and the ration talk. You flip the Johnny cake on a flat iron, the heat licking your knuckles. Acrid smoke from dried dung drifts past the pan and stings your nose. Coffee bubbles in a blackened pot and smells faintly sweet. The iron came from an outfitter in Independence, heavy but trusted. You rub the rim with a rag and set the cake back to finish. Flour and bacon sit at the core of the ration. The staples are simple: flour, bacon, beans, coffee, sometimes dried fruit or rice. Flour rides in sacks lashed under the wagon bed, and bacon comes in salted slabs that shine with brine. Beans clack in a small keg, and coffee rides in muslin bags. A biscuit cracks and sends steam into the cool air. Most days, that means a scoop of flour for bread, or Johnny cake, and a strip of bacon to grease the pan and flavor the pot. Coffee is counted carefully, a pinch per person, so the tin never empties too fast. Saleratus helps the dough rise, and bacon grease stands in for butter. Timber thins after the river towns. You cook over buffalo chips when wood is scarce. Because wood thins out on the plains, therefore, fires run on what animals leave behind. Sagebrush snaps and helps the flame catch, but the chips do most of the work. Morning and evening, children fan out to gather dry, flat pieces and stack them in sacks. Some folks call the piles prairie coal. It's like cooking on a camping stove made from yesterday's leftovers. The fire burns hot and quick, and the smoke hangs bitter in the still air. Short supplies change habits. Ladles dip a little shallower, and slabs of bacon turn into thin slices. Portions shrink first for grown-ups, and the children get the best spoonfuls when there is worry in the camp. Small hunting detours pull men off the line when tracks cross the trail, and a missed crossing for water can cost a day. Quiet barter runs between wagons at dusk. Coffee for tallow, a scoop of rice for a spoon of bacon grease, beans for a twist of tobacco. A woman with the company keeps a tally in a worn notebook, marking who borrowed beans and who returned coffee later. Sometimes a neighbor with a sick child gets a full ladle without a word. Hunger is a persuasive negotiator. Ration cuts show up in bodies and tempers. Energy sags, feet drag, and the singing that used to rise at night fades. With less fat, people feel cold when the wind moves through camp, and mouths taste dusty by midday. Morale dips when plates look thin, so small spats flare over who took an extra biscuit or a second cup of coffee. People save words, and the fire talk gets quiet. That hollow pull in the middle makes the miles feel longer. Careful stretching beats a lucky shot. Stretching supplies keeps teams moving longer than any lucky shot of game. A big kill ties a company to one spot for hours while knives work and strips hang, and the smell brings clouds of flies if the day runs warm. Salt is not endless, and drying racks take time and space the road rarely gives. Flour rides steady, bacon endures, and beans keep, so the wagon keeps rolling even when the rifles stay in their covers. A few carry jerked beef or parched corn from earlier stops, but those packets vanish long before the mountains. Luck brings antelope or sage hen now and then, but luck cannot be planned. Food alone does not set the pace. Even with full bellies, weather and terrain still set the schedule. Rivers rise after rain and hold a company on the bank. Mud turns the road to heavy glue, and heat pushes a halt at noon. You look up from the pan to the long horizon where mountains barely smudge the sky. You crest a broad divide. The wind flattens your hat and tugs your coat. The wagon groans as the team leans into the grade. Breath fogs in the thin morning, then clears in the push of sun. You follow long rivers west for weeks, then wide plains take over. South Pass waits ahead in the high country, the easy crossing of the Rockies that is a door that opens instead of a wall. After that gentle saddle comes rougher ground, cut by dry draws and broken rock. You follow the Platte for days, then the Sweetwater up toward the open notch. Fords show in trampled banks, and ferry ropes hiss across the current. Sage and short grass run flat under the wheels. Spare parts ride in your wagon, packed beside flour and tools. There is a spare wheel, tire irons, bolts, rawhide, and a tin of axle grease. The axle grease smells sharp when you lift the lid. A hammer rings once on an iron rim. On a still evening, you tighten a tire, swap a wheel, stitch canvas, and re-grease hubs. We stop each evening to check every bolt because wagons are simple but stressed daily. Therefore, repairs become a standing appointment. You cut new linchpins from oak when the iron ones vanish in grass. Canvas snaps and then settles as a squall passes. It's like nursing an aging used car across the country with one toolbox. You listen for new rattles and feel for heat in a hub. Loads that were neat in St. Joe creep loose by July, so you shift barrels and lash them again. You mend what you can, then roll again under thin light. You tie your hat down and lean into the gusts. Storms arrive with no appointment. Sleet pecks the canvas like sand. Low crossings turn into milked water, and swollen draws cut off the line of ruts. Some days you wait for the draw to drain, then throw brush in and try it anyway. A cold front brings hard September chill at altitude, and early snow can close the route over the heights and trap stragglers. By evening, a mild creek can push the team sideways. A headwind charges by the hour. Skill and spares are your buffer. Carrying extra wood, nails, grease, and know-how buys time the weather wants to steal. When a tongue splits or a wheel rim loosens, the kit turns delay into a pause. At Fort Laramie, you can buy a new chain or a mended wheel, and at Fort Bridger, a blacksmith might set a tire for hard cash. A neighbor may lend a linchpin, and you pay with coffee or flour. Traders, military posts, ferrymen, and kind neighbors shift the odds too near the end of the line. Follow the ruts toward a trading post where prices and news travel faster than wagons. Lift one slow breath. Let your shoulders and jaw loosen as the air goes in, then out. Take a second breath, a touch deeper, and feel your tongue rest against your teeth. One more breath, steady and easy, and let a low hum in your head meet the soft memory of a wagon wheel's creak. A calm camp sits under a low bluff. Stars look cold and steady above the wagons. The air carries a faint hide smell from a nearby post. A lantern makes a small gold circle on packed earth. Distant cattle bells tap a light rhythm. A rope creaks once against a hitching rail. A night watch walks slow around the livestock, listening and counting, because the herd is the pantry and the engine of the trail. Therefore, its quiet is everyone's sleep. Rivers already taught you caution. Repairs taught you patience, while a hub cooled or a tire reset. Routine carried miles when talk ran thin and boots rubbed raw. Trading posts dotted along key stretches, and they broke up the math of the road with barrels, nails, needles, and news. The pace stays cautious near the end. People hold back teams to keep hooves sound. They save axle strength for the last grades and time the approach, so no one limps into the finish. Your bed can hold the journey, so your mind doesn't have to. You can set down the river crossings, the lashing rope, the tally of dried beans. You can leave the night guard to his slow circle. Let a small, quiet curiosity take the reins for the last stretch. Who will stand at the posts ahead? Which faces wait in the glow? What marker says you made it? Starlight thins as a shape of buildings gathers at the edge of thought. A door throws a warm patch across the ground, not bright, just sure, like a promise you can touch with your boot toe. The company keeps its careful pace, even here, near the goal. You walk in easy time with them toward a place where goods and news swap hands, and the long list on your mind shrinks to simple choices. Let the lantern swing shut behind you and step toward the counter where what you need and what you hear change the road that remains. You lean on a rough counter inside a frontier fort. Hides hang beside tins of tea on high shelves. Tanned leather and smoke cling to the room. A clerk eyes your list and tallies with a stub of pencil. The post is private, and the garrison buys here too. Trading posts and army forts were the trail's supply hubs. You trade a spare blanket and a small mirror for flour, axle grease, and a pair of shoes. Paper crinkles as a clerk folds a small packet of tea. Outside, a river mutters over stones below a wooden landing. A blacksmith in the yard fits a new shoe to a mule, while freighters stack kegs by the door. A notice for a strayed ox flutters on a nail by the door. An interpreter leans in to help with routes and deals. He explains which ford is shallow, which bend has driftwood, and who keeps watch over the pass. He earns in coin or in goods. You hire a local guide for a hard stretch and ask two families what the mud was like last week. A chalked map on a board shows trails heading to Oregon, California, and the mines. Meetings along the road often looked like this. Wagons traded, shared news, and swapped labor with native families at river crossings and meadows. Travelers bought salmon, roots, or a fresh horse, and left tobacco or cloth in return. Many days were aid or negotiation. Conflict was the exception, not the rule, and most talk stayed practical. Prices bite at every counter and gate. Fort prices were the airport bottled water of the frontier. Posted rates sit on a board, and the sutler nods toward them when you haggle. A ferry lists its fee by the wheel, by the wagon, and by the head of cattle. A bag of flour costs double here, and a ferry charges by the axle. Because posts and toll roads charged monopoly prices, therefore, many families arrived with savings thinned to threads. Little bills stack into real debt. Some pay with promissory notes and hope to settle up after harvest. The last stretch forces a choice. You can run a dangerous river with rafts and rope, or pay for a rough toll road into the settled valleys. Some wait for water to drop. Others split the party and drive stock along the bank while boats try the channel. Rapids flip boats. Teams strain on ruts and roots. The welcome sign had a receipt stapled to it. Arrival feels less like triumph and more like a starting line. There is land to claim at an office, then fences to build, and seed to find. Debts from ferries and tolls follow you into town. Neighbors help with a barn, and you pay them back with days of work, tools, bought on credit, weigh on the table in the mind. The ledger does not stop with the trail. Let the dust fall, and consider what remains when the road ends. Step away from the counter and toward quieter ground, where the road finally stops. The Oregon Trail was a months-long logistics project, not a string of standoffs. Out past the river, the ruts blur at dusk, and the grass leans in. The wheel marks fade like chalk in light rain,